Hello again, I am Blunty, and by demand, it's time to look at this beastie. Now, as I said when I reviewed its predecessors, the Sony NEX-VG900 here represents the ability to get that gloriously pretty video that's coming out of many of the best DSLRs these days, but without all the compromises, clumsiness, and inherent trade-offs that shooting video with a camera that's been designed for stills shooting gives you. It's a video camera, designed and built from the ground up to be a video camera, and it's designed to make the job of getting kick-ass looking moving pictures sucked onto your memory card faster, easier, more painless and more comfortably than a DSLR with a video mode ever could. Unlike its ancestors, the VG10 and VG20 though, which both shared an APSC sized crop sensor, like the entire NEX line of cameras, the VG900 somehow crams in a big, fat, full-frame image sensor behind that E-mount lens attachment. But aside from that, the body is very much the same as its brethren. The same crispy, bright touchscreen, the same interface, which isn't the most efficient menu system I've ever used, but is still quite sensible and capable and easy to use. It has the same integrated handle, which is surprisingly comfortable and makes a wider variety of handheld shooting techniques much easier and much more comfortable and much more stable. It also has the twin shoe mounts and external microphone input, and the 4 capsule surround sound mics on the front. It has the same adjustable and excellent EVF with a very comfortable rubber eye cup. The same quick access to priority functions for video like zebra bars for checking your highlight clipping, engaging Sony's class-leading focus peaking, switching out your white balance, and one-touch program auto exposure for instantly compensating for sudden environmental changes. You have instant access to adjusting your iris, your gain, your shutter speed, all with a single button press. Unfortunately, Sony have still retained the small, slightly awkward and fiddly manual control wheel buried in the little corner down here, which in my opinion is one of the only serious flaws in this otherwise highly ergonomic layout. A large wheel around the lens mount would have been preferable in my opinion. And like its cousins, it records to SD cards, which of course can be switched out quickly and easily while rigged up on a tripod and such, unlike many stills cameras which bury the SD next to the battery compartment underneath the camera, which means you have to detach it from the tripod to change it out, blah blah blah. So, as I said, in most respects a near identical experience to its predecessors, with the exception of course of that shiny new full-frame sensor in place of the cropped one its family shares. But because it's still sitting behind an E-mount, if you use the standard E-mount lenses, you'll have to use the camera in cropped mode. The lenses just aren't designed to project an image big enough for a full-frame sensor. So that winds up giving you precisely the same aesthetic and effective focal lengths as a regular NEX camera does. You will need to use an adapter in order to attach the alpha mount full-frame compatible lenses to it to take advantage of the full-frame real estate of the full-frame sensor. Gloriously though, it's a very intelligent adapter, and it features the same translucent mirror technology that the stills cameras use, which means you retain proper autofocus abilities, and more than that, proper continuous autofocus abilities. So the hardware's all well and good, but we all know the end result is what matters, so let's take a look. Now, the very first thing I noticed, and what you're probably noticing right now, was a rather obvious vignetting when I used it in full frame mode. Look at the corners!
And aside from the vignetting around the sides of the image, which supposedly doesn't happen on all lenses but certainly happens on the lens that I've got to test with, there are a few other caveats that come with using it in full frame mode, and those are, if you want autofocus, you have to shoot with the lens wide open, which can be problematic in bright conditions, or if you want simply a deep depth of field, a deep focus. But dropping into manual focus isn't a big of an issue on the Sony as it is with a lot of other cameras, because Sony's focus peaking is so good. It's basically dummy mode manual focus, or even dummy mode autofocus really. It works so well, it makes it just simple, a doddle really, to nail your manual focus. So that's, you know, it's not a huge issue that you can't use autofocus with anything else but wide open, but it is something you need to be aware of when you're shooting with this camera in the full frame mode. The other thing is, because you're shooting with these big alpha lenses that are designed for full frame stills cameras, adjustments to the aperture when you're shooting are not exactly smooth. They're a bit juddery, and they do make noise in a lot of lenses too. You hear that stopping down, which the mic will pick up on because the mic is directly above it. Fortunately though, there is a solution for that too. You can put on external mics, or you can record your audio separately like you would be doing if you were shooting anything really serious anyway. The mic you're hearing me on now, by the way, is the on-camera mic, the default on-camera mic, which is by far and away much better than most other onboard mics you'll find on any other camera out there. And of course, even if you are using a full frame alpha lens, you can still crop down to the APS-C type framing. So if you have a lens that does this vignetting business, you can get rid of it. You'll extend the range of your lens even. So it's good to have that sort of dual mode available in the full frame lenses, so you can use full frame and the APS-C frame size cropping.
Your other option, if you're using a lens which happens to vignette, is you can crop in on your full frame video slightly in your editor. Pushed into about 10% and you can cut it all out. Not an ideal solution, but it works well enough. Aside from that, everything else about shooting in full frame mode works brilliantly. You'll have to be mindful of noisy lenses if you want continuous autofocus, as many of these lenses are of course not designed with silent focus mechanisms, a symptom of their roots in the stills world, I'm afraid. Again though, fortunately Sony's focus peaking makes working in manual focus mode nearly trivial. Pretty much any idiot can nail a focus pull with this system, it's so easy. And of course switching to an external microphone or audio source will eliminate the noise problem anyway. I'm not going to go on and on about the colour and contrast and sharpness and dynamic range and all that kind of stuff like I usually do in these reviews. Suffice to say, the result is fantastic. Every bit as good as the APS-C NEX-VG cameras I reviewed before this, and thanks to the full frame sensor, it reminded me quite a lot of Sony's brilliant Alpha 99, which I also reviewed and in fact gushed about rather enthusiastically in a previous video. Plus, you're already looking at the results compressed on YouTube, sure, but anyone who's looking at this camera will know what they're looking for in the image anyway, so I'll trust you guys to peep that stuff on your own. Now, the full frame aesthetic is pretty much the only reason someone would buy this camera over its cheaper sibling models, but it is a very compelling reason in its own right. There is simply an aesthetic in full frame shooting that is just very difficult, sometimes completely impossible to emulate on any of the various smaller censored systems out there. But it's not purely about the ability to pull in a razor-thin depth of field, although that ability to have superior control over isolating your subject is the main draw of a full-frame camera. And although the NEX-VG900 certainly can take stills, and they look great, this is not a camera you should look at if that's something you'll be doing a lot of. Shooting stills is a pretty clumsy experience here, of course, with the entirety of the camera set up for video shooting, but it's still a handy feature to have if you need to snap off some handy stills during production for, continuity reference and stuff like that. The experience of shooting with the NEX-VG900 was extremely pleasant. Like I said in the beginning, given that I'm shooting with the same kind of lenses and the same sensor sizes, even an experienced viewer probably can't tell just by looking at this stuff if it was shot with a DSLR or a full-on video camera. The benefit of shooting with the system is not in the end result particularly, but in the capture. Because regardless of if you're shooting in full frame or are taking advantage of the APS-C crop mode and the growing list of E-mount lenses, or even using the E-mount adapters for other glass of old school manual lenses and the like, for a serious videographer it makes life so much easier. There are no compromises in the handling or control, no concessions to the world of stills. It's a machine designed to make setting up for a shot more nimble, more sensible. It's the right tool for the right job. It's not a hammer with a socket wrench at one end of the handle and a screwdriver sticking out of the top. It's just a bloody good hammer. It does one thing and it does it really well. And unlike shooting with a DSLR, there's no need to have a bag full of bolt-on accessories and cages and attachments. You don't need a monitor. The swiveling screen here works brilliantly. And if you're in bright sun like I was on this day, you don't need to attach a screen hood or one of those snap-on LCD screen diopter viewfinder attachment things. It's got a brilliant EVF in a tilting arm and a nice comfortable eye cup built onto it already. You don't need a cage or rail systems to attach handles and arms and other gizmos to make shooting a steady shot handheld practical or comfortable. The VG900 already has a top handle and a twin shoe mount at the top and a big broad hand grip with wide comfortable straps. In short, as you've seen, the image quality is every bit as crispy and as smooth as you'd expect from a Sony these days. Shooting in either 25 or 50p, the motion has a nice flow to it, and the near instant access to any manual adjustments a videographer needs makes the VG900 a superb tool for those needing a reliable, unflappable, simple run-and-gun shooter that's ready to go right out of your bag. No screwing around with rigging and attachments, no unnecessary menu diving for setup, and no handling compromises. I didn't like that the full-frame lens I was testing vignetted. Again, to be clear, this does not happen with all full-frame lenses, just happens to do it with the one I had. And I still don't like that tiny fiddly control wheel the entire line of NEX-VGs have, but aside from that, it's a great bit of kit. Battery life was very solid, kind of middle-of-the-road experience. Couple of hours of footage per battery brick fell right within what I'd expected. So if I was shooting stuff like documentary work or travel programming or event and news gathering, this would be a tool I'd like to have, making my life easier. Day or night, any subject, any lighting, handheld or sticks, it just let me get the job done with zero fuss and fiddle. It's such a different experience to try and shooting this stuff with a DSLR. And if you pair it up with one of Sony's compact shooters from the NEX line, say the NEX6 or something, and use that as a B-roll camera, because it has a similar look and feel to the footage, you can also share the lenses, of course, and you've got yourself a hell of a kit out for that kind of work. I reckon it's got to make you a happy shooter. Now, this is not a tool that everyone will need, nor will even make the best use from, but for those it will suit, for those who need it, man, you folks are going to love it. Thanks for watching. I am Blunty, and I will catch you next time.